The rain began just as Emily Carter pulled into her cousin's driveway, thin drops tapping against the windshield like quiet warnings. And for a moment she stayed inside the car, hands resting on the steering wheel, wondering why this simple babysitting job felt heavier than it should. Emily was 32, recently single, and still carrying the weight of a life that had not turned out the way she planned. And tonight, helping her cousin Sarah by watching her 6-year-old son, Noah, felt like the right thing to do, even if her heart felt tired. She stepped inside the warm house, greeted by the smell of dinner and the sound of Noah's excited voice as he ran toward her, wrapping his arms around her legs and talking nonstop about school, cartoons, and a toy car he had lost earlier. And that, Mom, a toy car he had lost earlier, that day. Emily smiled easily for him, because that part came naturally, and for a while she forgot about herself as she helped with homework, warmed food, and listened to Sarah rush through last-minute instructions before leaving for her night shift. At the hospital, once the door closed behind Sarah, the house grew quiet in a way that felt different. Not empty, but still. And Emily realized how rarely she experienced calm without feeling lonely. She and Noah ate dinner together, laughing when he spilled juice, and proudly cleaned it up himself. And later they curled up on the couch to watch a movie Noah had already seen too many times, his head slowly leaning against her arm as his eyes grew heavy. When he finally fell asleep, breathing soft and even, Emily gently carried him to the bedroom, tucked him in, and stood there longer than necessary, watching his peaceful face and feeling something ache inside her chest. A longing she couldn't name, part sadness, part hope. Back in the living room, she sat on the couch alone, the TV off, the rain louder now. And without thinking, she opened her phone and scrolled through old photos. Pictures from years ago when she believed love followed a clear path, when she thought effort always led to happiness, when she was engaged and sure of who she was going to become. Those plans were gone now, quietly ended, not with anger or drama, but with disappointment that lingered longer than she expected, just as she locked her phone. It buzzed again, and the name on the screen made her pause. Daniel Wright. Daniel was Sarah's neighbor, a man Emily had met only a few times during family events. Someone she remembered as polite and reserved, with kind eyes that seemed to notice small things. The message was simple, telling her Sarah mentioned she was babysitting and that he was nearby if she needed help. And yet Emily stared at it, surprised by the sudden warmth she felt reading such an ordinary sentence. She replied with a brief thank you. Nothing personal, nothing inviting. But when she set the phone down, the quiet no longer felt so heavy. She walked to the window and watched the rain blur the streetlights, thinking about how strange life was, how moments that seemed unimportant could suddenly shift the way a night felt. Emily checked on Noah again, adjusting his blanket when he turned in his sleep, and whispered softly that everything was okay, even though she wasn't sure she meant herself or him. Back in the living room, she made tea, letting the steam rise slowly, and thought about how she had come here expecting nothing more than a quiet night. Yet her heart felt awake in a way it hadn't for a long time. The house held a calm energy, filled with small signs of family life, drawings on the fridge, toys in corners. Reminders that love existed in simple forms, not just in big promises that sometimes failed. Emily sat down again, holding her mug, listening to the rain and the ticking clock, unaware that this ordinary evening was already setting something in motion. That agreeing to babysit had placed her exactly where she needed to be. And as she closed her eyes for a brief moment, she felt a sense of anticipation she couldn't explain, like the first page of a story had just been turned, and the rest was waiting to unfold. The knock on the door came late, sharp and unexpected, pulling Emily out of her thoughts so quickly that her heart raced as if something terrible had happened. And she glanced toward the hallway to make sure Noah was still asleep before moving quietly toward the door. The house felt different at that hour, shadows longer, the rain still tapping against the windows. And when Emily opened the door and saw Daniel standing there with a small paper bag in his hand, her surprise turned into relief she hadn't known she was waiting for. He spoke softly, explaining that Sarah had called him in a hurry after realizing she left Noah's medicine behind. And Emily thanked him, stepping aside so he could come in without waking the child. The air between them felt careful, like both were aware that this was not a planned meeting, but also not an unwanted one. And as they sat at the kitchen table, their voices low, the house seemed to lean in and listen. Daniel asked how Emily was holding up, and she gave an honest answer instead of a polite one, telling him that some days felt heavier than others, especially after plans fell apart and the future looked unclear. He listened without interrupting, his attention steady, and when it was his turn to speak, he shared that life had changed for him too. That loss had taught him silence in ways he never expected. And that living next door to a family house full of noise sometimes made that silence louder. Emily felt something shift as she heard his words. Because there was no sadness being performed, no need for sympathy, just truth spoken simply. The conversation moved quickly but deeply, touching on work, on family, on the quiet moments that followed big life changes, and Emily realized she was more comfortable than she had been in a long time. As if the walls around her heart had loosened without her noticing. The clock ticked on the wall, time moving forward, yet the moment felt suspended, held together by shared understanding rather than attraction alone. Daniel stood to leave after a while, aware of the late hour, and Emily walked him to the door. The rain still falling outside, the street lights glowing softly behind him. Before stepping out, he paused and looked at her, not with intensity but with calm, and said that life sometimes closes doors so people can find better ones. Words that landed gently but stayed heavy in her mind. After he left, the house felt quieter than before, but not empty, and Emily stood still for a moment, listening to the fading sound of his footsteps and the steady rain, feeling as though something important had just passed through her evening. She checked on Noah again, making sure he was comfortable. And as she returned to the couch, she noticed how different the room felt, how the night no longer pressed down on her chest. Sleep came slowly, but her thoughts were no longer tangled with regret or fear, instead moving toward questions about possibility, about whether life could surprise her in good ways again. Emily stared at the ceiling, the memory of Daniel's voice steady in her head, and realized that sometimes connection arrives quietly, without drama or promises, simply through presence at the right moment. As the rain softened outside and the house settled into stillness, Emily finally closed her eyes, unaware that this short, unexpected visit had already changed the direction of her thoughts, and that the morning waiting ahead would reveal just how much one honest conversation could alter the shape of an ordinary night. Sunlight poured through the kitchen window the next morning. And golden, and Emily Carter woke with a start. The quiet of the house suddenly feeling alive in a way that made her pulse quicken. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then, she heard laughter, bright, innocent, unstoppably, and her heart lifted as she realized it was Noah's voice. She got up quickly, curious, and walked toward the kitchen, only to freeze in place when she saw Daniel standing by the stove, flipping pancakes with careful attention while Noah sat at the table, chattering away about his toys, his school, and the dreams he had for the day. The scene caught her completely off guard, not because it was chaotic, but because it was so peaceful, so ordinary. And yet it hit her with the force of something extraordinary. Daniel looked up, smiling faintly, surprised to see her, and quickly explained that Sarah had called early, stuck at the hospital, and asked him to come over to help check on Noah and her as well, and that he had knocked earlier but the door was unlocked, so he went in to start breakfast. Emily wanted to be angry for the intrusion, but she couldn't find the words. There was no anger to give, only a strange, warm feeling spreading through her chest, a sense of life moving in a direction she hadn't expected. Noah noticed her and ran over, throwing his small arms around her legs, squealing that breakfast was almost ready and telling her every detail about the pancakes, about how Daniel had helped him mix the batter, about the syrup, the butter, and even a spilled drop that made them both laugh. Emily bent down to ruffle his hair, smiling through the fluttering emotions in her heart, and felt a sudden lightness she hadn't felt in months. She looked at Daniel again, who had returned to stirring the pancakes with quiet confidence, and she realized that this moment, simple and unplanned, was teaching her something profound about connection, about shared responsibility, and about the unexpected ways people can enter our lives. There was no grand gesture, no dramatic declaration, just a man quietly cooking breakfast and a child laughing. Yet the scene was deeply affecting, like a snapshot of a future she didn't even know she wanted but suddenly couldn't imagine. Without, Emily moved closer, helping set the table and making sure Noah had everything he needed, and Daniel glanced at her occasionally. His eyes soft, calm, reassuring, as if he knew exactly how important these ordinary actions were. Time passed without notice, the three of them caught in the natural rhythm of morning, and when Sarah finally arrived an hour later, Emily felt grateful and almost reluctant to hand Noah back to his mother, because she had experienced a tiny glimpse of family life in a way that felt safe, warm, and profoundly comforting. Sarah thanked both of them repeatedly, unaware of the deeper connection forming silently in her kitchen, and Noah hugged Emily tightly, his small voice full of innocence and earnestness, telling her she should come back soon and that Daniel should, too. Emily's heart swelled at the words, simple and innocent as they were, feeling the weight of love not expressed in romance, but in care, presence, and kindness. And when she walked toward the door later to leave, Daniel came with her, the morning sun behind him casting a soft glow around his figure. They walked together quietly, sharing glances, not needing many words, but exchanging a profound understanding that something had shifted between them. Emily admitted softly that she hadn't expected to feel so much, and Daniel replied gently that neither had he, that sometimes life gives moments that remind us what we've been missing. She smiled, feeling a mixture of relief, excitement, and the quiet tremor of possibility, realizing that love and connection could arrive in subtle, unexpected ways through small acts and shared responsibility rather than grand gestures. As she got into her car, she looked back at the house, at Daniel standing on the porch with the morning sunlight catching his hair, and at Noah waving wildly, and she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of hope. It was a hope not built on fantasy, not built on rushed promises, but on ordinary moments made extraordinary by the presence of people who cared. Emily knew in that moment that life could surprise her in beautiful ways, that mornings like this could leave her speechless not because of drama, but because of the quiet perfection of simple things. And as she started the engine, the warmth from the morning sun and the laughter of a child lingered in her heart, leaving her with a realization she would carry forever. Sometimes the most meaningful changes in life happen not through planning or effort, but through unexpected kindness, through shared responsibility, and through moments that catch you completely off guard. Weeks passed after that quiet morning, and Emily Carter found herself visiting her cousin's house more often, not just to see Noah, but because she realized she wanted to see Daniel too, to share ordinary moments that suddenly felt extraordinary. Their conversations grew longer, flowing easily from one topic to another, sometimes serious, sometimes light, always comfortable. And Emily noticed that the awkward tension from the first night had transformed into something soft and steady, a presence that made her feel safe and understood. She watched Daniel with Noah during playtime in the yard, seeing how patient and kind he was, how he laughed at Noah's silly jokes and celebrated every small achievement. And she felt a warmth in her chest. She hadn't expected, a gentle longing, not for a man or romance alone, but for the quiet, stable life he represented. Slowly, Emily allowed herself to be part of their mornings and afternoons, sharing meals, helping with homework, and laughing at Noah's endless stories. discovering that the happiness she had been seeking wasn't in grand adventures or dramatic gestures, but in these small, steady moments where life felt complete and uncomplicated. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the yard in soft gold, Emily realized she had been holding her breath for months without noticing. That the tension she carried from past heartbreaks had eased into a calm she hadn't thought possible. And it hit her that Daniel wasn't just a friend, a neighbor, or someone helping out. He was a presence that grounded her, someone whose quiet strength allowed her to feel hope again. Their connection never rushed or demanded, and that was what made it real, what made it different from anything she had experienced before. A love that was gentle, patient, and full of understanding, built on honesty, shared responsibility, and kindness rather than intensity or drama. Emily reflected on the first night she babysat Noah, realizing that she had thought she was only helping her cousin. But the experience had given her something unexpected, the beginning of a life she wanted. To embrace a life where she could heal, laugh, and feel cherished without fear or doubt. Evenings spent on the porch talking quietly as the sky darkened became a ritual, each word, each smile, weaving them closer together, and Emily began to recognize the beauty in their slow rhythm. How love could exist without rush, without declarations, just in the presence of someone who truly cared. She watched Daniel play with Noah, building towers, reading stories, and teaching him new words, and she felt a surge of gratitude for being part of that household, for witnessing the quiet magic of family, connection, and mutual respect. And she knew that this was exactly the life she wanted to step into, a life full of laughter, trust, and safety. One night, as they sat under a sky full of stars, Daniel turned to Emily, looking at her with sincerity and tenderness, and said that he didn't want to rush her, didn't want to scare her, but wanted to walk beside her if she would let him, offering not a grand promise, but a steady hand to hold through life's uncertainties. Emily felt tears prick her eyes, realizing that she didn't need grand gestures to feel loved or secure. That what mattered most was honesty, patience, and shared moments, and she held his hand, whispering that it was all she had ever wanted. The kind of love that filled the quiet spaces in her heart. Over time, Emily understood that what began as a simple act of babysitting had grown into something profoundly life-changing. That caring for a child and connecting with a neighbor had revealed the kind of life she wanted to live, full of trust, warmth, laughter, and genuine connection. Love, she realized, did not always arrive in dramatic flashes or passionate storms. Sometimes it came slowly, in soft mornings, in small conversations, in laughter echoing through the kitchen, in shared responsibilities that brought hearts together. Emily learned that life could heal even the deepest hurts when approached with openness, kindness, and a willingness to embrace unexpected joy, and that she could allow herself to hope again without fear. Watching Daniel and Noah together, she finally understood that she wasn't just in love with a person. She was in love with a life she could build alongside them, a life of stability, warmth, and quiet happiness. And as she looked at Daniel, smiling at her softly, and Noah, beaming from his place at the table, Emily realized that sometimes the moments that seem small, ordinary, and unremarkable at first are the ones that change everything, that teach us what love really means, and that leave our hearts full in ways we never anticipated. That night, Emily finally let herself believe that the future could be gentle, steady, and beautiful, that she could trust life again, and that a simple morning babysitting her cousin's son had opened the door to everything she had been quietly longing for, a safe, happy, and love-filled life she never thought she would have.